Welcome to CS Radio.
Welcome to CS Radio, episode 238. I'm Natty Leach, and the city of Philadelphia has been abuzz about a certain individual who, after leading his team to greatness, took a little bit of a break, but now is coming out of retirement when we need him the most. I'm speaking, of course, of returning co-host, Dustin Miller.
Oh, Natty, yeah, hi. I thought you were talking about Brandon Graham and the Eagles, but that's
who?
BG?
Oh, BG.
Go
yeah.
Birds.
I heard he was pretty good, too.
Yeah, Hall of Fame guy. Class act.
No, Brandon Graham's been on my mind, so I that was in my head when I wrote that. Also in my head when I wrote that, or when we were planning for today, is that Brandon Graham probably signed a contract not too long ago.
Yeah, he likely, I do wonder what those conversations end up being later in careers. Have they been talking about it at length? Do we have details on how long? Was it just a 1 year? I mean,
as far as I heard him do an interview, and he was like, it's fine. Money's good. I'm happy.
Like, we'll figure it out. Or it's figured out. Or...
So I haven't seen the exact numbers, but I'm sure it's, he's taken care of. It's
lucrative.
It's lucrative enough. It's more than we'll ever make in 30 years of our life or something, even though he's only going to be 6 months or so.
6 months, yeah, likely.
But anyway, that brings us to what I'd like to talk about today, which we talked about a little bit adjacently in other episodes of the podcast before. Things related to offers. Brandon Graham had his offer on the table, so I'm kind of curious how we can talk through what do we think comes up with students when they ask questions about they have to negotiate an offer. What kind of advice can we give them that's going to be most useful to them, and like what are some do's and don'ts of what we see most often there.
Yeah, I actually like offer negotiation appointments a lot. I feel like maybe it's because we don't get them as frequent as other ones, but I enjoy the conversations. I think each of them come with their own layers of complexity, and there's a lot of gray area when it comes to offer negotiation.
A lot of gray area.
And students...
And all they want to see is green.
Yeah, green. Yeah, got to see the green, but they really want more of a direct answer. And I feel bad sometimes because there is nuance to a lot of the conversations, and there's not always the most direct way to say, like, this is what you should do. And we never want to be in a position, at least I don't, as advisors, to be like, you should do this.
Yeah. You
should take this offer. You should decline this. And I've had students straight up ask me, well, would you take it?
And that's kind of like my philosophy on everything advising, where I totally understand that a lot of times students, it's easier to hear prescriptive, do exactly X, Y, and Z, and that'll be successful. But there's so many moving parts for every student, especially because every offer's a little bit different. Every company that you're looking at is a little bit different, and each student's situation is different. I've talked to students who, as much as I can assume that usually people are going to be most interested in salary, some people don't care about salary at all, and they would rather talk about equity options or their location or their remote time working from home or the amount of time they get accrual for PTO and all these other different moving parts that are within an offer package that I don't want to necessarily neglect those two.
And I think that ends up kind of sparking a different conversation when we're meeting with students, and maybe you get past that first layer of the salary and they're like, well, but what if they say they can't negotiate on the salary? And I'm like, that's okay. There's so many other things in the offer that are negotiable. I don't know about you, but anecdotally, one of the things that seems to make students the most nervous is asking about start date changes.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one too that I hadn't thought about. Yep.
And I feel like those are actually typically sometimes the most flexible piece of an offer to that extent. They're like, but I had a vacation planned, or my family, I wanted to go home and visit my family before starting. And I typically tell students that is something there is a lot of flexibility with for the most part. And that conversation can typically happen, and it's kind of a low stakes one, even something I don't like to head into offer negotiations and immediately ask about the money.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, hey, maybe soften them up a little bit with a little bit softer of a question of, hey, what about like start date? I was hoping to start like July 1 instead of this June 15th date.
Yep. So, let's start. I think that's a great point. Let's start at the top of what students usually, I think, expect in the situation. I think maybe even before we get there, a lot of times when I'm thinking through this conversation, I'm usually expecting it to be a senior or a rising senior who has either a return offer or a job for full time, that we're really going to dive into this a little bit more. That being said, I've also had plenty of students who signed up for offer negotiation appointment types recently who were juniors. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there. Negotiating for an internship, I think, is very different. You have a lot of less flexibility there.
Totally agree.
So I think for the most part, let's focus in on seniors looking at full-time jobs. For me, I will almost always recommend, first and foremost, that they do as much research and gain as much information as possible before they even go into this conversation.
Yeah, I think that sometimes they also feel like they have to over-explain maybe why they'd be asking for more money in particular, and that feels like a very natural thing to do because it's not the most comfortable conversation to have as many times as you negotiate or put through it. I mean, I know even in my own personal life, I've tried it, right? And I typically say one of three things happens. They either say, we have a little bit of wiggle room, like I think we can compensate, for that.
What did you have in mind? They usually throw it back on you.
Yeah, exactly. Or, unfortunately, this is like what we've budgeted the role to be. This is what's going to have to be at. Or the third option is, I'm not sure, so I'm going to have to check with somebody. Those are typically, I feel like, the most common answers or responses. So, like, the worst case scenario is you get the answer no, and you're at the exact same place that you were before and hopefully weren't too upset about the initial offer.
And what's most important about that research phase or trying to gain as much information is that a lot of times employers will want to tie you down as fast as possible. So it'll feel like you don't have time to actually do that. So I think the first piece of advice I give to every student is to always try to give yourself some buffer space. That can help for a lot of reasons. They might just call you up and you pick up the phone because you're expecting a 212 number from New York or something or whatever office you're thinking it's going to be. And you pick up the phone and they say what it is. I mean, sometimes there's the implicit idea that they want you to say yes or no right now. And students often feel like they don't have as much agency to be able to say no because they want to be excited and still be a team player with everything. But I think the first thing is always saying, lead with your excitement.
Yeah.
I've loved with the being a part of the interview process so far. Really excited about contributing to the office in this role. Just hoping if we could have this conversation a little bit later. I want to gain a little bit more information before I make a hard commitment to you. I think is always totally fair, and I think most employers will respect that. Worst case scenario, they'll try to rush you through it, but I think they will always be okay with you saying, could I have a few days or could I have the week and I'll get back and let you know. I think what's most standard for students is that employers will send an email and say, hey, great, here's your offer. You need to sign and let us know by next week.
Right.
And they'll say a really specific day or time that they'll want to hear back from the student for.
And that's really when hopefully they've done some preliminary research or might have an idea of, if we're still talking about salary, like what the range might look like ahead of time. So it's not a complete surprise when the offer comes in. And then if you couple that with having a little bit more time, as excited as you're going to be to want to accept the offer on the phone right away, you have to see some stuff in writing. I do think it's important. If you verbally accept anything, you're actually giving up any leverage you have as well.
And a lot of times students say, I have no leverage whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, because they're like, I don't have
the only
another
job offer I have right now.
Which actually, in my opinion, doesn't matter at all. You still have leverage in a lot of different ways. You've leveraged yourself in their time. They've already committed so much time to you. Clearly, they have an interest in you joining their organization.
They've invested however long it's taken them to
hours
and literal money for the systems they use to review your application, interview you, the time commitment gone along with that, make a decision on whether they want to talk to you, and now are reaching out to you. So there's real leverage there where they want to retain you. They're making this offer for a reason because they loved you, and they're putting the time and investment into that already.
Which is why then it's okay to negotiate, right? Like I get that question a lot, or I'm fearful that they're going to pull the offer if I ask for more. There's a fine line. If you try to negotiate once or maybe even push a second time and you've been shut down, don't try to negotiate a third, fourth, and fifth time. Then you're reaching into the headache zone of a candidate or if somebody, to join a team, or if that's indicative or you only care about the money, then it might start to shift people's ideas. But almost exclusive, 99.9% of the time, I feel like you're not going to have something pulled just for negotiating. They're expecting it.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of that, but I think the basics of it is just like I said with trying to stall for time. Mm-hmm. If you're appreciative and respectful of what they've done for you so far, the worst case is they say they stay firm to the commitment of when they need to know by. Yeah. Maybe they wanted you to know they let them know by tomorrow, and that's, I think, way too fast. But worst case scenario, they're going to say, no, we really need to know by tomorrow, and you kind of have to get things together and figure it out by then. Now, there's other things in there that we can talk through to help you with that. But I think the first hurdle is getting over the fear of feeling like you're going to make enemies here, when I think in reality, they already have a commitment to you in a way that gives you a lot of leverage right from the start.
Absolutely. And I do want to just emphasize the thing you said about being able to be excited and have energy on the call. It's kind of like a pet peeve, and it's something my dad actually probably instilled in me, where it's like, he'll call a candidate or somebody who's expecting, and this goes for interviewing too, or you're expecting maybe that offer call, and you're like, hello, or like, hi. It's like, hi, this is Dustin. You know what I mean? Like, and then when you get that offer and it comes through, it's like, oh, like, this is great. Like, thank you so much. I've been thinking about this. And just to project that energy, I think can almost help to affirm their decision in that moment to extend that offer. And hopefully, like you said, can be more willing to work with you on getting some extra time.
And a lot of times from an employer's perspective, the biggest fear for them is sometimes the unknown. Mm-hmm. So and if they have concerns that you're actually going to be committed to the offer, that's what they're scared of.
True.
But the way you kind of allay that fear is by coming through with the excitement and appreciation, which are probably things that hopefully you showcase in the interview process to begin with, and why they're excited to work with you already. I think one of the other good reasons to ask for time, we talk about this a lot, but when you have competing offers or other things that are going on, maybe your top firm hasn't reached back out to you and you're still interviewing there. We often operate in a world with imperfect information. Mm-hmm. So it's really common that you're going to get an offer before you know everything else. So sometimes asking for a little bit more time can maybe help things move. You can also, if you're waiting to hear back from company B, but company A already gave you a job offer and company B is your top choice, let them know. You
now have leverage.
Now you have even more leverage for that company. And
different leverage.
You can say, again, leading with excitement and enthusiasm, you could say, hey, I've really loved the interview process so far. Really excited to learn more about the process. However, I did want to let you know I recently received an offer and have an offer deadline of whatever. Is there any possibility to help with expediting the process, or any additional information I can have to help me make the decision moving forward?
Absolutely. And that is so common. I feel like out of all the stuff we might talk about today, the juggling of multiple processes is really difficult, especially across different industries when they have different timelines, or you feel like you're not exactly sure when you're supposed to hear, or, well, I really like company B, but I just had my first round with them. There's no way I'm going to have this wrapped up in a week, and then some difficult conversations kind of start to happen.
Yeah, and very realistically, you might not still be able to get that information, but at least you kind of put it out there. One, I think it's helpful for you from company A that you already have that offer from. It gives you a sense of how willing are they to work with you on things, which can sometimes play into like how you evaluate how the future might go for you for other conversations about potential promotions in the future or advancement in other ways in your career. So sometimes that can be a useful data point in making your decision on how they're kind of approaching this conversation. And for company B, you're telling them, hey, you're my top choice, and that's going to be really exciting for them already. So I think it's all positive. So we talked about the importance of gaining information and researching. What types of ways do you recommend students get prepared to have all the information they need to get ready for this conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of it, and I think there's a couple different avenues in particular that I point to. Maybe one that's obvious to you and I, but maybe not to other students, is our outcomes data that we do collect on our website. So for anyone,
that's my favorite one.
It's awesome, right? Like, I love being able to point to it, and have to give a big shout out and credit to Emily Barali in our office, as well as Michael. They're always collating like that data and first destination survey, which is something in the career services world that students are basically helping other students out when they're giving us that information. Which is anonymous anyway, but it's really helping to inform students later on. And so looking at that, especially with the interactive dashboard that Emily has created for students to be able to use, it could really help inform decisions. So that's like my first one, like my go-to. Like, check out what your peers are being comped at. For
and that's my favorite one, because it's like one of the flagship resources that we have, I think, because we use it across the entire timeline of working with students, all from the starting point of exploring careers, being able to see what are things that other people have gone into for different industries and specific companies and job titles. But at this point now, you can really leverage the salary data side of things that is also in there. You can see the median, the average, so you can see the high, the low. You can do a sub breakdown, like if you're looking at private equity. If you go to finance, you can click then on the subcategory of private equity underneath finance. And there's other examples of that in other industries too. But I think it's such a good data point. Our employers use that too. I had an employer ask me last week, hey, we want to make sure we're offering our students enough. Could you point me towards where your average salary is? I think it was a smaller company.
That's awesome though that they like reached out and like thought to ask that. Like that says a lot about that company, in my opinion, that they're serious about our students and wanting to make sure they can compete. And I think having fair data points on their end. So it really does help both parties.
Totally. So that's a really good one. Now that doesn't. It's usually aggregated. You mentioned the idea that it's anonymous. So I think the downside is that you're not going to be able to see specifically like, oh, I want to work at Sony Music and this exact title had this offer salary. It's going to be more broad than that. It's going to say Median Entertainment had an average salary of this. So what are other ways that you would also recommend students get some specific data points?
I mean, I think there's maybe some of the larger names out there. I think Levels. Or salary.
I think Levels uses really broad
like terminology.
They use like the bureaus of statistics, job bureaus statistics or something.
I mean, honestly, like I think the thing is, so like with these other resources, so like Salary or Levels or Glassdoor, where it's self-reported information on specific companies, and you typically have to verify that employment. So that can be trusted for, I think, in a lot of ways. But the idea is that you're using a combination of these resources to kind of come to a conclusion. I don't know that there's going to be, we're not going to say one thing here today that's like, yep, this is like your go-to, your check. Like you should be doing your research just like you would for any classwork or any paper that you are writing. You need research from multiple areas to then kind of arrive at what your data point is going to be. What range are you expecting for this type of role? And comparing that to what range is either posted or not posted in the job description. Because at the end of the day, if a company has, $80,000 to $90,000 posted in the salary, and all of your research says that your peers or other folks have gotten 110 to 120, you're probably not going to be able to get the bottom of your range is 20,000 over the top of their range. That's probably too high of a negotiation. We could talk about that a little bit, I'm sure, but it's just to help inform an initial decision.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the numbers thing part of it too. But I think all those are good resources for finding specific data points. A lot of times with students, especially for a smaller company, or maybe it's a geographic region that there's less data on. Maybe they're they grew up in Cincinnati and they want to work at the Cincinnati office, and all the salary points that we have on our website are more focused on New York or California or whatever.
Yeah.
I think all those are good ways to look, but you could also look for comparable things, like what are comps that are outside of either maybe within our system or outside. So you could think through what is either a competitor or a peer to this company that I'd be applying to that might have information online, maybe an existing posting that I could go off of. That's really good for smaller companies that maybe there aren't 100 people from Penn going there every single year like some of the bigger companies are. That's one way you could do that as well.
I do think that when you're evaluating an offer too, it's funny. I know you said we're kind of maybe like talk about the numbers a little bit, and you mentioned like Cincinnati, and then you said New York. It immediately made me think of cost of living as well. And so I don't know, when you're evaluating multiple offers, it's really easy just to look at the number and feel like that's like such a big difference. But I think looking at things like what is your rent going to cost, or how much is it going to cost for you to get out to wherever you are? Are you from that area? Tax implications. There's so many things that go into what that salary or what that net ends up looking like, that it's definitely worth doing your research. That on the surface level, if something's offering you, $150,000 in LA in New York is not $150,000 in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yep. And I mean, all of this is you're trying to find a ballpark for yourself of what you're like how to think about the offer that was given for you. It's not to say that you see something somewhere else and say, oh, well, it needs to be this high. And I think that's an overall good way to approach this process, is to make sure that you're not being too intractable unless that is a true necessity for you within the negotiation process. I think usually you're going to be more successful if you're able to be flexible on a number of different pieces. That includes how you're thinking about salary. I think inevitably, we'll talk about this a little bit, but inevitably there might be a true cutoff. I need X, and you may be willing to walk away for that. Now, I think a lot of our students are not in that position where they're willing to walk away, mainly because it's your first job. You're probably excited for whatever it is, and it's probably, I mean, pretty much every offer I talk to a student with, I always look at them like, this is a great offer for a first position out of college.
Absolutely.
It's a good salary. It's a great company. It looks like an exciting role that you're going to be able to contribute to. That's almost always going to be the case.
Yeah.
So I think it's rare that a student is going to say like, oh, this is completely non-negotiable unless they're able to do this.
Right.
I've had one student during my time who treated his offer negotiation that way. And I give this example to students sometimes because I think it's an interesting way to think through the idea of like, when will you be too strict for an employer?
Oh.
And then they're going to say, I'm going to give up on this person and move on.
Yeah.
And so the student talked to me and he said very bluntly, I got this offer in. It is close to the bottom of my choices that I would have. I don't have any other offers in yet, but realistically, I don't really want this. And so, yeah, I was kind of going on the conversation of, well, maybe you just want to decline it then if that's where you're at. But he said, there might be some positives that I want to explore. I want to learn a little bit more. But if it gets to a point of conversation for salary, I'm going to be very strict for knowing like this is my cutoff and they're not able to make it. Then there's other things I'm worried about. So I'm just going to move on. I said, okay, if you feel confident with that, totally fine. So he went to the employer and he told me that he had the conversation. He said, this is all I'm willing to take if you're able to do it. And the employer said, we can't go that high, or is there any other adjustments that we could make to maybe help compensate for that? He said no. And they said, well, thanks for your time. I guess we'll look and talk to other candidates. And they moved on. And then he said 2 hours later, the hiring manager of that position, he was talking to like a recruiter or somebody else. He said the hiring manager, the person above that, called him back on the phone and said, I'm so sorry. Let's talk more, and kind of chased after him.
Wow.
So I said, even in the one scenario I've talked to a student who was like super hardline about it, the employer was still like ended up chasing after him.
That's pretty impressive, honestly.
It kind of is. Now, that's not to say that I think that that's what you should do.
I would not probably advise.
Your success rate is probably going to be much lower if you're being that hardline about it. The truth is, we've talked about this on the podcast, but the truth is, these are people who are being advocates for you. So in that first scenario, he was probably talking to someone who then, like you mentioned earlier, is going to have to take it up to HR or the hiring manager or the MD, whoever it might be, go up the chain, and they're fighting for you. So if you were able to talk with them and showcase, this is why I'm excited, this is why I think this is going to be a good move for me, blah, 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 like, and they're going to hopefully have that same sort of energy, then that's going to be successful for you. But if you're turning people off, then then they're going to say, this guy's being annoying. He really wants this. Should we even bother with it? And the person said no. Then tell them no.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a point of, even sometimes you can be hardline, but I wouldn't do it for the most part unless you know that there's like a certain cutoff for yourself for whatever reason.
It just doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It just feels like a little off-putting, and you've already gone through the process, and hopefully you've highlighted so many of your qualities and your strengths, and you just don't want it to be like you get to the end and then this is how you're like being towards it. But I get it, to some extent, but also I think sometimes a reality check of like, this is a first job out of school. Yeah. First job, not last job. Like, it's okay. And like you said, we see a lot of offers and we're like, wow, like that is a great offer. Like you should be very happy with that.
And in some ways, a colleague at Wharton said this to me, your first job should be your worst job. As in, I don't think it means that you need to be miserable. I think the spirit of that is that your first job doesn't need to be your best job. Like, you're just getting started gaining experience. Like, this is a jumping off point for you that, you can think about it as a 1 or 2 year commitment and then move on to what's next.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to peak at your like job at 22 or 23. Exactly. That wouldn't be my my go-to, certainly. But I don't know. I think that the conversation always might feel a little bit awkward too, and I get that question a lot from students. It's like, well, how do I actually go about having the conversation of negotiating my offer?
So let's go to that right now. I think we talked a little bit about the preparation stage. The only extra thing I'll say is we talked so much about salary. It's also worth preparing to look into, are there other moving parts of this? They probably gave you, hopefully, they gave you a full job offer that has like your benefits listed. A lot of times you can go to the HR website of companies and see like what are the standard benefits that are going to be available.
And those are not negotiable.
They're like rarely negotiable.
If anything. It's like, and I don't know. I found that like HR doesn't even, it's like, no, you have to select an individual medical plan or a dental plan. You want to make sure you have comprehensive benefits, I think, for anyone looking for full time, or if you have questions about the retirement or something like that.
And as a lot of those things will not be negotiable. There are sometimes they are. I have definitely seen people work for startups or smaller companies, and they've said, hey, I'm still, what is it, 28 that you can still be on your parents' health insurance or something, 26. And they said, I'll waive the health insurance if you could compensate me in other ways. And they said, let's look into a way, because that is a cost to them in some regard.
Right. But you're not going to be able to like negotiate your premium on your health care or try to get like, I mean, hire a company match. I've heard like that's rare. You know, a lot of those things are set at such a higher level than just your individual hiring.
But it goes into how you evaluate the offer as a whole and like what this package is for you. But yeah, let's go to like how you actually have that conversation. Like once you feel like, okay, I've asked for more time. I've started by asking for a little bit more time so I can be prepared. I've done some research, so I feel more prepared so I can actually talk through some things. What do you recommend students do to actually get this ball rolling for a conversation though?
So now that first of all, I always say you want to have this conversation live. And when I say live, I don't mean in person or like, going up to headquarters.
Zoom is fine.
Zoom or over the phone.
Yeah,
right.
Phone.
Like I just feel like it's one of those conversations that needs to happen in the moment because it does put a little bit of pressure on the employer, right? Whereas if you're getting an email and you're trying to like detail all this stuff out or outline things, it's a little bit easier, I feel like, for people also just to say no over email.
It's so much easier to say no. And it's hard to like, you can't always tell the vibes in an email.
No.
And when you're having that conversation, you can get a better feel for what's actually possible.
Right. And you can like, the way someone's dictating or like sharing about like that as a possibility or not, that can come across, to your point, so many different ways over an email. So that's always my first thing. Like you've asked for more time, great. But now when the time comes to have the conversation, that conversation needs to happen over the phone or over Zoom. I feel like that's the best practice.
Just phrase it as, again, lead with excitement. Really excited about the opportunity. I just had a few questions I wanted to run by you before moving forward.
Yeah.
You could keep it as simple as that.
Absolutely. And then like, you don't have to ask them, be like, hey, I wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss salary.
Yes.
Because immediately that's going to turn them off.
They're going to be like,
they're going to have to feel like they're like, hey, just want to let you know, like, I'm happy to meet. However, we're not negotiable. And you're just, don't open that can of worms. They're expecting you to negotiate again, but that doesn't mean don't do it in writing.
Yeah.
You need to have the conversation live. Now, that said, any negotiation that does happen live and any changes that happen do end up need to be in writing. You need to have a paper trail. We could talk about that. I don't want to jump too far ahead there. So you asked about the ball rolling. So ask for the call. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't have to lead with the salary as far as something is like negotiating. Be like, again, I'm really excited about the offer. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, starting with the start date, for example. I know and so just lay that out there. Even if you don't have a ton of huge concerns over the start date, it's a pretty low stakes. There's not a whole lot of tension or pressure typically around start date. Also, like work schedule flexibility. I think you mentioned like, in office days versus not, like your work setting.
Like I said, a lot of those may not be negotiable, but they could be super useful for how you actually evaluate the offer. So it's good to ask those questions to better understand.
And it's not going to be a huge turnoff either way, the question being asked or the response, or it just doesn't feel like as serious as asking about the compensation.
And a lot of these are questions that like you can't realistically ask in an interview. I mean, you could, but I think it usually comes off as like nitpicky. You're getting too far ahead of things.
Yeah, I just like, because my questions or my answers to that is like, I'm really just focused on learning more about the role and hopefully you learning about me. But when that time comes, so I like to deal with that. And then my go-to line that I've been using recently, I'm interested on your opinion on this. I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily want to lay out all of your reasonings as to why you think you should have more in the initial ask. So I might say something like, Natty, I just want to say like, I definitely appreciate the offer. $90,000, that's an awesome salary. Thank you so much. When I began this search, I was anticipating a range of 100 to 110,000. I was wondering if we could open up a conversation about how we could get into that range. And then stop talking.
Yes.
I tell people, I'm like, just stop. Because, again, the tendency to want to over-explain as to why, you need to just resist that urge and just leave the air and now allow them to respond.
I 95% agree with you. The only thing that I'll say is a little bit different is, though I would say everything that you're saying, is I would still be prepared to talk through if they were to ask
why,
or if it came up in conversation.
Be prepared,
like,
but
be prepared to say that, but like, don't give it all up front.
No, yeah, I should have said that too. Like in what you said earlier about preparing the research, you need to have all that information. Don't go in blind. But I'm saying, don't be like, I was anticipating 100 to 110,000 because on the Penn Career Services outcomes data, it said that my peer should be this, and I'm going to have a master's degree next year. Like, don't lay all that out there. I think just stop talking with when you want to say your reasons next and see how they respond.
Let them respond first.
You might not have to say anything.
They might just say,
sure.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, we can get right up to the top of that range, 110.
Or let's see what's possible.
And now, again, you're going to be really, if you get that answer and that response, you're going to be really excited. But you still have to, I feel like, resist that urge to like accept on the spot.
You can almost always, at any point in any part of this process, say, thanks so much. I'll get back to you soon.
Yeah, and I would need to see these changes that we've discussed in
Looking
writing.
forward to review it in
so
writing.
that I can fully review it, a comprehensive review to allow me to make a decision. You're not making. I always tell students this: don't make promises. Don't be like, well, if you could increase the salary, I would definitely accept it. And it's just like you don't need to put yourself in that position. But yeah, you're right. You can almost always say, I'm happy to review this and get back to you, but I would love to see the changes we talked about. Because if Natty the recruiter tells Dustin he can have an additional $20,000, and I'm like, okay, great, I'm in, and then Natty the recruiter leaves the next day and it's replaced by another recruiter, it's like, Natty said I could have $20,000. Natty who? You know what I mean? And then it's not in writing. So that's why that step is really important.
So one of the things you said reminded me of something I wanted to get, or at least put out there. So I think when we're talking about salary negotiation and offer negotiation, I think there's a lot of, I want to say this respectfully, but I won't. There's a lot of like boomer advice out there where it's like, you have to do it this way and you have to think about it this way. I think one of the things you said sort of fits in that category of like, just shut up and let the employer say something. And sometimes it's useful because I think one of the boomer advice ones that I'm thinking of is don't be the first person to say a number, as I've heard before. What do you think about that? And I have a few other ones that I've heard kind of out there in the ethos before that I have mixed feelings on, but that's one of them. So never say the number first. What do you think about that?
I think that it ends up just kind of like you're going like back and forth and you're not actually then getting to the point of the conversation that you're hoping to have. I will say that advice depends a little bit if something has been posted in a description in advance. Like if you already know a number, you both know this number. So I don't have a problem with students saying first of all, I do agree with the advice. Never say a number.
Yeah.
Right? Like don't lock yourself into a hard set number. It needs to be a range. Or again, almost everything in offer negotiation can be brought back to leverage. And if you give yourself just one number, you are out leveraging yourself because you've now told them like, this is the number you did get me at. Meanwhile, their band could have been an additional 5 or 10 more, and you've just nixed yourself of that opportunity too.
I think one of the questions you even lead into this conversation could be, is there a budgeted salary range?
It's a great question.
That I haven't seen yet.
It's a great question.
Especially if it's not part of the job description. You could ask that because that might be a way to, from I think the positives of that advice that feels a little old school, it lets them set the expectations of the number for you so you know what to go off of. But also they're probably going to give you a range. They're going to say, oh, we were expecting it to be in the range of 100 and 120,000.
Based off experience. And
but then at least you have, okay, there's that range. And you can go from, oh, great, this offer was at 110. I was hoping to be closer to the 115 to 120 range.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then kind of move the conversation forward that way.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't necessarily subscribe to like don't say a number first because I feel like at some point
somebody has to.
You're also the one. I can understand the perspective. I try to put myself in the shoes of that advice, and it's like I assume it comes from not wanting to lowball yourself. From an offer, which I appreciate.
Because if you say 60 and they were willing to give you 120,
that's obviously that would be the worst.
Yes.
Like that would
yes.
and you found out later.
Like that is true.
Yeah. But at some point, you're the one who asked for the conversation and are trying to negotiate the salary. So you have to give something. And you saying a number or a range of numbers first hopefully isn't too far off from either what they could consider or not, because otherwise you weren't in the same ballpark anyway from the conversation. So that's kind of my response on that. I don't have a problem with students saying a number first, if anything, because if you say...
If it's well researched and it's a number that would make sense to them, because then I think there's no reason.
What if that same student, to your point, said only 5? If they didn't say anything, and they're like, I was hoping, I appreciate the $90,000 offer. I was hoping we can negotiate the salary up a little bit. That recruiter or that hiring manager, there is still a budget and a business side to that. They'd be like, you know what? Let's just toss them another 5. We'll see if that does it. When they really had
they could have given you 10.
Yeah, they had the authority to give you up to 10. And so that's why I think giving a range can be important. I typically tell people, make the bottom of your range maybe like 5 or 10 more than whatever the top of the range is that was offered.
Yeah.
Because then you're at least somewhat realistic. Don't go in asking for 30 or 40, 50.
I think like an easy flow to conversation is ask your questions. Then it could be then your last question of that slew of things you're asking to get better information on could just be, is the salary negotiable?
Yeah.
Or was there a budgeted range for the salary in addition that I haven't seen, or something along those lines? Like, is the salary negotiable? They will probably either say no, or what did you have in mind, which is when all that research comes into play. But talking about the numbers leads me to my other question that I think I hear a lot is just out there, how you should think about this. And I don't always know if this is totally true. But people say, oh, you should give them a number that is twice what you want so that they meet you in between. So if you wanted to if they gave you 100 and you wanted to get 110, you would start by saying 120.
I don't hate it. I think I use parts of that advice. I probably don't go that far on the spectrum, or like that far, like extreme. I would say, like, if there's a number in your head you'd be really happy with, and you want to make that the bottom of your range, because most people, if they're honest with themselves, probably would take the offer that was given to them in the first place. So like any bump is great.
Yes.
So in your example, if somebody said, they came in at 90, or they came in at 100, and I was really hoping for 110, I would not start my range at 120, because now we have a $20,000 discrepancy.
Yes,
and that
which might be too high to turn the whole conversation off.
Yeah, right. Now the conversation feels off. So I would say, I really appreciate, again, all the same stuff we said, appreciating the offer. I was anticipating that range being in the 110 to 120 range. What can we have a conversation about moving into that range? And again, stop talking.
And I'll give a real life example for me when I was faced with this at one point coming out of college. Is I was given an offer. I was already working in Philadelphia at Temple University, and I had a company I had worked with previously reach out and they extended an offer to me saying, hey, we'd love to keep working with you and bring you back on board, move you back up to New York City. And I was like, great, I loved working with you guys. Really interested in hearing more about what you had to say. And then the number they gave me was less than or about the same as what I was making at Temple, which was like not what I was expecting. In my head, I was like, oh man, what if it's like twice what I'm making at Temple?
Yeah, right.
I mean, higher ed doesn't pay that much. Like maybe this is going to be a big difference. And it wasn't that much. And I kind of phrased it in the way, I think I was mostly appreciative, I think, because I did really like everyone there. But I said something along the lines of, I would be moving to New York City, which is higher cost of living. I'm in a master's program right now. Is there anything that we could do to work on the salary side of things? And their response was kind of broad at first, but it gave me the sense, they're probably not actually going to be able to move up high enough that it's going to make a difference to me. And then that kind of just ended the whole conversation, and that was fine. It was like no like love lost there,
right?
But it was better. Like I better understood, that's all they can do, and that's probably not even going to be the best situation for me anyway to have to go through that. My
own personal experience as far as like trying or looking to ask, my first job out of my master's program, the salary range had been posted as a flat number. There wasn't a range. It was just a flat number. And when I got the actual offer over the phone, they said a number that was $1,000 more, $1,000 more. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, this is great. Yeah. I did then try to negotiate anyway, but I was so excited. Like, I made the mistake. I didn't have this advice at the time, but I accepted on the phone. I was all excited. Yeah. There were so many other factors at play about trying to like align my life, and there was geographical considerations, and COVID was going on. There was a lot to consider, and so the number, I did try to negotiate more, but then it was kind of like, no, this is the top, and I was like, oh, that doesn't change how I feel. Like, I'm still so excited. So I wasn't successful in that. And then at that same institution, I was moving into a different role. It was a director type role as opposed to an assistant director role. And then the offer had come in, and it was 3 less than what I was making as an assistant director. Yeah. And I was like, I cannot do that.
Yeah. I can't walk backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Especially not for like the level of responsibility difference and just the compensation. And then so I was able to negotiate, and then ended up getting 5 more from their offer, which only resulted in being 2 more above what I had been making at the time. So I guess it was somewhat successful in that way. And then this job here, I was not successful. There was no moving.
And I mean, that's true in higher ed. Like, there's really just not that much wiggle room to begin with. One thing you said there was one of my other things I was thinking about is just the idea of that number. Man, I totally lost it. Okay,
so what are you gonna say about just like taking like less money to move up in like responsibility or something? Or
so some of it is the values piece. We talk about that a lot across many episodes on the podcast, but just the idea of like what's most important to you.
Yeah.
So one thing that I did want to bring up at some point is that idea of we emphasize salary right now because usually it's easy to be quantitative and think through it, and you have really specific ways you can research it and talk about that, have that conversation. But it might be that they're not willing to move on that. That could be a true reality. It might be that that's not the most important thing to you. I think I want to start by talking through like one of the reasons why I think it's useful to look at salary, and I think it's related to what you just said in that you didn't want to go backwards. I think a lot of times salary tends to be, it's not always, but tends to be the best thing you can negotiate for, because one, your future roles can often be dictated by what you made in the past.
Absolutely.
And, you know, there's lots of legal reasons states are saying that they can't actually ask you for what your previous salary was anymore. That's become much more standard place than it used to be. But I think there is still some reality where you're not going to take a position that's less than what you were making before many times. And sometimes that's an easy selling point to an employer to say, I'm coming from something with less responsibility and I'm making less than that. Is there any way we can get it just a little bit above to make me feel good about it? I think that's an easy way to kind of connect with them on it. Every single year, even in higher ed, we don't get tremendous bonuses, but every year we get our little 1% or 2% bonus, but that's based on our base salary. So even if you make a very small adjustment, even you say, let's say you get that 5,000 extra, that 1,000 extra from your negotiation stage, every year that's extra money that you're making that you wouldn't have made before due to that like incremental growth from year to year. So I think there's a lot of like real life examples where even though people might be scared of this conversation, it can have tremendous long-term implications on your career and overall how much you're making and how you're valued.
It also puts you in the driver's seat if you, and this is kind of, you know, we're talking a lot about like that initial negotiation for your first job, but I like what you just brought up about like setting you up for the future too. When you have a current role and you're salaried at that point, you're in the driver's seat for a lot of conversations with other employers. So you can sometimes, you have the benefit of kind of skipping right to it in some cases. If like I've had recruiters or people reach out to me on LinkedIn about certain roles, and honestly, because I'm extremely happy here in a ton of facets, one of my first questions will be like, you know, just to be respectful of both of our times, like, what is the budgeted salary for this range? Because, you know, and then, you know, a number will come in and be like, yeah, you know, I'm not in a position to, you know, to take back or take a step back in that way.
They should be happy that they don't waste their time
in
chasing down an applicant that there's going to
and so
not go for it.
To your point of like, it kind of is indicative of what is to come. It does give you some advantage. Or, you know, maybe they would have responded, I didn't get this response, but maybe a response would have been, hey, you know, for the right candidate, like we definitely can go more than that, or like we have this range instead. So it definitely gives you a whole lot of control, which leads me to the point of the best time to look for a job is when you have a job too, in some case.
You have the most security available.
Most security, most leverage. And ultimately you can always end the conversation with like, kind of what we just said of like, hey, like I'm not in a position to take that step back. So.
Yeah. And going into even that like hard line example I gave earlier, but whenever you're ending a conversation with, thank you, I'm happy to continue reviewing this and I'll be back in touch next. If they already had a deadline for you, you could say if it was Friday, you could say I'll be back in touch on Friday. To some extent that might make them scramble and think, you know what, we probably could do an extra 5,000. Let's see what we can do and make sure that they have that available to them. So it actually puts a little bit of pressure on them and not just you for that too. The last thing I was thinking about too was not everything is about salary. And a lot of times, especially for the fields that Penn students are interested in, the reality is so many companies are really standardized about salary offers these days. Like if you look at the Wharton data, you're going to see 500 people getting $110,000.
Yeah.
Because that's what everyone is offering in finance and consulting. Obviously, there's some differences. Some are a little above, some are a little below. But there's a lot of exactly 110. So much so that our median for the entire class is exactly 110.
Yeah.
So I bring that up to say, like, what if their answer is just, no, that's not available, or we're not able to do that? Is there anything else that stands out that might still be useful for you to talk through or talk about?
So sometimes if people can't budge on the base, I feel like so some industries do have like the sign-on bonus, you know, culture. So that's kind of, you know, for anyone who might not be aware, I know it sounds kind of obvious, but just like a one-off, like additional, you know, I've heard of 5, 10, you know, 15 in some, you know, which is insane.
The quant
to
rolls
think
are
about.
like here's 100,000.
Yeah,
It's
on top of
absurd
right.
for some fields.
It blows my mind. But so you can ask about that. If you are going to be relocating in any capacity,
yes, this is the big one that I like.
I think relocation is something very fair to ask.
Relocation assistance.
If you're going across the country, maybe that even means like a plane ticket or helping to like move your stuff out in the first place. That can be really helpful. Even if you're based in Philly for school and you're going up to New York, you should still ask.
Yeah. And it's an easy one to bring up that you don't even have to say that much. You can say, I just want to make sure that I'm settled and ready to devote myself to the role as soon as I get started.
And going along with that, sometimes some companies will have kind of, I don't know what people really call it. I'm just going to call it kind of like an office stipend, where it's more of just like equipment or setup, or hey, like this is a remote role, but
maybe you have 2 days that are remote.
Can I have I would love a standing desk for my health and wellness, and like you can negotiate that kind of stuff or ask about it. We talked about start date a lot, so I don't want to harp on that any further.
Relocation assistance is the biggest one to me, and I think that's one that does actually bleed into the summer negotiation, where I think it's almost impossible that an employer is going to really change all that much unless you're working for like a really small company or a startup for negotiating for like an hourly wage difference for just 3 months. But relocation assistance, I think that would make sense because a lot of times they might think, oh, you know what, there are ways we can help you get settled in for the 3 months or help you find a sublet. We do work with real estate agents in the area or something. Like they might actually be able to provide useful ways to help you feel more settled.
And that's really helpful for getting started off for so many students who have not been working full time or maybe have been paying their way through school and have like a whole lot of other expenses. And moving is expensive. Yeah. And getting set up is expensive. And especially with a lot of rentals today asking for first, last, and security deposit. Yep. I mean, you're talking like in some cases an entire month and a half salary to be able to get settled in that way. So it's always good to ask that too. I think that's great.
And many employers will give that upfront already, and it's not like there's all that many that will immediately be jumping to give you an extra $5,000 or whatever. But I think at the very least, if you're talking about it this way, they can usually give you resources that might be helpful, even if it's not exactly money. They could say, oh, maybe here's this neighborhood that students live in around the area that you had no idea because you aren't from that area. So you might actually reveal information that could be useful there too. I think that covers a lot of things that I think are useful as part of this conversation. Anything else that stands out from the offer side that you think would be remiss not to mention?
Not remiss not to mention, but I think just want to emphasize again, like having good energy and being enthusiastic. And even if you are negotiating, I just want to leave you with, you should always negotiate. I think initially for the most part, you don't want to find out later that other people or peers of yours are, sometimes stuff comes up in conversation. And it's just like, this is the only time for that role specifically, you have an opportunity to maybe give yourself a raise.
It's much easier to do it early on than it is later. Now, I'll present some of the strategies for if they're not able to move. One of them could be requesting, if you feel really confident, I'm going to hit the ground running and crush it. Yeah. You could ask about when are the opportunities for performance reviews and showcasing my efforts and the bonus structure, and how does, maybe there is a performance bonus already and you don't know how that structure works. Like you might hone in those questions more. The other thing I want to just finally hit home is something you said earlier, is that we're mentioning a lot of things that you could ask. The idea is that you shouldn't go into this conversation and ask absolutely everything in the kitchen sink, table two, and then take them for all they're worth. Because that's when they're going to feel like, okay, when is this conversation ever going to end? This person's constantly asking for things. And then they themselves might feel like, I don't want to work with someone who's just always asking for the moon and the stars that I can't always give them. Now, it's not to discourage people, because I think the most important thing is that students feel confident to at least start this conversation. And I think it's much more likely, because there's already a natural unease there, that probably you ask a couple questions, you see what you can do, and then you have more information that you can go off of and you move on. So I think it's kind of rare that students are going to ask for like 1,000 things as they're checking through the list. But I bring it up just to say, if you are the kind of person that wanted to lay down your laundry list of everything, maybe choose the ones that are most important to you to focus in on. And then when you're having that conversation, have a feel for, okay, this one's not negotiable, but I want to bring up this next one as my most important thing too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And you just don't want to be like that candidate in that way. So yeah, being able to lay that, and that's all stuff we can help with ultimately too.
That's why we're here. We're happy to talk through all of this. Even as, like I mentioned, juniors, it's harder to do, but sometimes just having the language to start asking if things are negotiable is the first step to feeling confident for once you need to actually have that conversation for a full-time offer. So I think I want to be encouraging of juniors or even sophomores who have internships and want to start this conversation, because we can talk through all these things we mentioned today. Hopefully this was helpful. We could make it more specific in an appointment, but hopefully help you feel that you're in a spot where you can more confidently bring that to the table and advocate for yourself in a really good way.
Yeah, it's really important to do it.
Cool. So I think that was a great conversation. Thanks, Dustin, so much.
Yeah, you too, Natty.
We'll wrap it up for the day, and we'll always have to bring you back on again whenever Michael disappears on us.
I think it was very nice finally pointed out that it was Michael's understudy. That's quite the compliment.
I said earlier, but no, you bring your own energy and your own style to things too. So that's why I changed it to more of the BG reference.
It's good in doses.
Yeah. So thanks so much for the conversation, and we will see you all next time on CS Radio.
This podcast is produced by the University of Pennsylvania Career Services Office, a division of University Life. It was created by J. Michael DeAngelis and Amy Lynn Kirshner. Your hosts and producers are J. Michael DeAngelis and Natty Leach, and it's produced, mixed, and edited by Lorna Lynn. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at Penn Career Serve. We'll see you next time on CS Radio.